What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to another edition of the Lumbar Trucking Show. We're on episode 91. Thank you all for being here. Coming at you live, brought on one of the best friends of the show here, Justin Martin of Freight Waves, and there's been some news trickling down the grapevine recently. There's a congressman out there out of Virginia. His name is Bob Good, and he's introduced a bad bill. And it's crazy because this is a guy he's a member of the Freedom Caucus. We've been making friends in Congress with CDLDU, who happen to be on the Freedom Caucus. Specifically, I've mentioned HR 3039 on this show several times, which would prevent mandatory speed limiters. But first and foremost, let me welcome back to the show, Justin Martin. What's up, man?
Nothing much, man. Dude, I gotta say, since the first time I came on, like over a year ago, it has been such a joy watching your profile just grow. You know, you not to say that like you were nothing at the time, but like compared to where you are now, you're like not even the same person.
Yeah, things have changed. I mean, just in the last 18 months alone, since since getting my own truck, I mean, it's been a trial by fire. And what I did is I just, I keep asking questions and I keep wanting to talk to people and I just keep wanting to talk to drivers. And I think one of the best things I did with this show was pivot from just me, solo talking, telling my story, to getting other people's stories on there and just and I remember reiterating this once, saying like, and this is I think true in any sort of business. Like whenever you're going to go into business or kind of quote invest in yourself, as they say, like you gotta become obsessed with it. You gotta
Mm-hmm.
like want to know everything, talk to everybody. I mean, this is and not to pull, and this I know this is on brand for me, but I mean, Napoleon studied Caesar, Caesar studied Alexander. Like if you want to advance, and I'm not saying that I'm going to be, I'm going to be the Napoleon of trucking, which would be great. Which, you never know. Never say never. But I mean, if you're going to get involved in something, or if you're very interested in something, go all in, study what the greats are doing, and by all means, you come with a storied trucking career. Rachel's, one of the most knowledgeable. In regards to journalism in the industry, and then Gord and his experience, and just everybody who comes on from each of their corners, I've learned so much, and the show and like the amount that all the people who've come on my show have shined, and then the only reason that the show has had the growth it's had is because of the people who've come on and the conversations we had. So, dude, I want to thank you for that. I appreciate it.
Oh, no problem. Yeah, I've always been like anyone I network with, I'm like, you gotta have Lombard on your show. You gotta have Lombard. The guy's energy is just through the roof. I see him going places, and yeah, you're performing beyond my wildest expectations.
No, I appreciate it, man. Yeah, I'm hoping to take this off in a different direction. I mean, like, there's guys out there who do freight media well.
Mm-hmm.
You love Paul and and Freight Caviar and the gentleman over there at USA Transportation. I know Asian Mai's got a good show. The gentleman over there at Truck and Hustle, he does great, and he actually has agreed to come on the show soon. Manuel, I believe his name is. He's coming on the show. But each of their own has their own separate kind of niche and personality. And I think that I don't think that when it comes to freight media, it's oversaturated enough not to keep the
No,
show rolling.
not at all. And I mean, we've been growing what the truck like on the social medias for about a year and a half now, and just I'd say once we passed like 3,000 followers on TikTok on Twitter and 30,000 on TikTok, I really noticed the responses are different. It felt in the beginning like we were just kind of shouting into the void, but then like we've kind of found our voice and more importantly found our audience, and that's really resonated. Like I get so much more positive feedback now than we ever did in the beginning, because in the beginning it was just people, sharing their dumb opinions back and forth. But now it's like, hey, Lombard, What the Truck, Asian Mai, these are all guys that they can like hit up and say, I work for company X, Y, and Z. This is the stuff I'm noticing. So it's really exciting to see fans and viewers like reaching out to us. Asian Mai is actually going to be on What the Truck tomorrow. I got bumped.
Oh, dude,
I'm,
that's not.
I'm supposed to be on the show every Wednesday, and Duna was like, "Nah, I'm cutting you tomorrow because we got Asian Mai on." So I was like, "All right, he's a big fish."
I got to text him back because I met him at Matt's and I know he told me he'd come on the show. I just genuinely want to get his story too. He's a good guy. But no, you're right. I mean, I get tagged in I'm at the point now on TikTok, similar to What the Truck, where people are tagging me in videos about like certain
Mm-hmm.
anything like drama related, because people have seen that I've made comments on autonomous Kodiak. I talk about crispy on the ATA. I really, when it comes to the truckers of TikTok, nobody goes on there and talks about the ATA and stuff. Like they'll talk about the Teamsters a little bit, and there was a little bit of yellow drama, but nobody's making Machiavellian comparisons to the ATA and how we need to take them out. Like not a lot of drivers know about the ATA and their narrative and all this stuff. So it's like not even Asian Mai nor Truck and Hustle really bring that up. Like they don't bring up the kind of stuff that like the driver shortage narrative.
Mm-hmm.
Like they haven't honed in on that and kind of cradled that, because that's like the crux of where a lot of this content comes from, because it's like the foundation of where some of the systemic oppressions of the industry are kind of coming from. So I'm excited that there's only room for What the Truck and this show, and I think what everybody's doing in regards to freight media to go up. And
Yeah.
it gets me fired up.
When you've been doing this for like the last year or two, what was like? Were there any like topics you really touched on that like really shot your profile up?
I think like as an engagement on TikTok, or maybe the show. I
Oh,
like
just
or
anything
just
like with us. Like I would say our coverage of Yellow just really like level like that went up like 5 levels. I would say because I would have people maybe once a week or maybe once a month DM us and say, "Hey, love your content," and then that was it. They just post in the DMs and ghost. But now it's like every day I got driver after driver saying, you guys informed us better than like our company. Like so many Yellow drivers, especially, have hit us up and me, blowing up my phone saying, "Hey, this is what's happening. Please get the word out because we're doing a better job of like networking people together and getting the information out than like the company was directly to their employees." Which I don't begrudge. I mean, it's an impossible task really. So much was happening at the time that the rumor mill was like out of control, and trying to like confirm everything before you kind of put it out there was like a really daunting task. So kudos to Rachel and all the fine people at FreightWaves for really putting in the hard work with that.
Yeah, I'd say the two biggest pivots that have probably happened, like engagement wise, was when I had Gord on the show for the first time. And for anybody, is this your first time listening? Go back and listen to my episode, an interview with Gord McGill, and that's kind of where I almost got like red pilled a little bit. It started with I first listened to Gord when he went on Odd Lots, which is a Bloomberg podcast, and I was like, God damn, this man's a fucking genius. This is the Dark Knight right here. And lo and behold, and Gord is a normal person like us, and he wasn't hard to get a hold of. And then so he came on the show, and then from there, I was like, man, I really want to put the hammer down on like talking to drivers and and just keeping the content going, so to speak. Because it stuck with me ever since Gord came on. Because when we talked about solutions, he said we need to keep talking. Like that's
Mm-hmm.
one of the things he says is we need to keep talking. So I was like, well, I want to keep doing that. So from there, me personally is when I really pivoted into more of advocacy, getting involved with CDLDU. But engagement wise, what really shot up, like I guess my presence on social media and what's gained listeners was when I had Jesse Barrymore on, and when I made and I made a TikTok advertising our episode, because that TikTok got like 750,000 views,
Oh
where
wow.
I called myself the supply chain crisis actor. And that jumped me up that jumped me up from like 2,000 to 8,000 TikTok followers. And that's when people started to realize, oh, you have a show. And it kind of went from there. And then it's just like, so it's slowly coming. And I don't even remember what episode Jesse was. And I recorded that episode back in February with Jesse. And I believe with Gord, it was in December. So it's really probably winter of this year, when the Bears were hibernating, we were out on the attack. And that I'd say and it's just gone from there. And then from there, and from there, it's just not stopping. Like I'm just going to keep it going, because I get I've gotten messages. All it takes is one, and I think Candace came on the show. She said, Jesus will leave the 99 for the one of the herd. And that's the thing. I got one message from a guy who's like, I've been trucking for 20 something years. I like what you have to say on your show. If somebody like that's going to message me positivity, then I have no reason to stop.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and
Men especially, just they remember every single compliment they've ever been given.
Mhm. Yeah.
when
Oh
I
yeah.
when I did the ride along with Plus AI at F3 last year, their driver that they used to train the AI, his name was Christian. This is a guy with like 3 million. Like I maybe cracked 100, maybe, or a million, maybe 1.5 million in my career. So that's 15 years behind the wheel. This guy had 3 million miles behind the wheel. So he's forgotten more stuff than I will ever know about truck driving. And right at the end of our ride, he goes, "You're a good driver." And man, I've been riding that high ever since.
Oh yeah, man. That'll keep you going. That's fucking that. Yeah, that's some Christmas spirit to fucking run on there. Yeah, those
hmm
compliments, those sit with you. And yeah, anytime an old school guy has said, "I really like what you have to say," or it's crazy, this much, having been this, having been so young, like not been doing it for decades and stuff like that. And it's because, well, I'm talking to people who have been doing it for decades, and I've learned the history, and I also have a name behind it. I was talking to my
Yeah.
dad recently on the phone, and he echoes his how proud he's been of me, especially in regards to the show. And I said, well, I don't have any of this without my last name, without
Mm.
you and and your father, and your father and his father before him. So that's who I really give a lot of the credit to. And honestly, it's just I found this stuff is very interesting. What I love about this stuff is, and what people don't get is everything we talk about in freight is indicative of everything else going on in society. All
Yeah.
the political stuff, all the bills, the labor movement, because and on one side of the spectrum, you have drivers like UPS getting a raise, but then on the flip side, you have guys, making no money from rates bottoming out. So, I mean, and all of this is very much spread out throughout because this is happening at Amazon warehouses. This is happening to nurses. This is happening to teachers. Like a lot of what we talk about is all parallel to a lot of other stuff going on. And it's just like, so that's what kind of also keeps me going is like, it's not just about one different niche. It's a microcosm of what's going on throughout the whole country.
Trucking is the number one occupation for non-college educated males in the country. There was that really viral video with Tucker Carlson, Ben Shapiro that went nuts. I think last year, where uh, Ben asked him, if you were, Emperor of America and you had a magic wand, would you pass a law to, prohibit autonomous vehicles from advancing and taking jobs from American citizens? And Tucker's reply was, "Are you joking?" In a second. And that, like, and I understood immediately why that went as viral as it did, because um, people who want to push technology as quickly as they can don't have the foresight to like realize that they're going to be wrestling with um, political and societal consequences from that, like we've never seen. Like you're gonna see such a populist backlash from that, and like, okay, you really sure you want to go there? And
Yeah,
I don't think enough people like kind of think of it that way.
no, they just think people, because nothing's happened on that macro scale yet, and this is what we're
Yeah.
learning with the advancement of AI. Is like this isn't the advancement of AI, and I think Gord shared a good Substack about this, and that written by somebody else, and it was like, and it said like it had talked about the tech problem. And the issues with tech is it's not as innovative as something like the steam engine. It's not like the automobile. Like what these inventions do aren't for true utility, so to speak. Like they're like it's not, there's always a demand to get someplace faster.
hmm
Like, of course it's faster to take a car than a horse. Of course a steam powered ship is going to be better than a coal or however ships, but a ship with sails, whatever, what I'm trying to say. Like, of course this stuff is innovative, but I believe the article he said there's nothing innovative about parking your car, getting out, pulling out your phone, scanning a QR code, having to pay, insert your payment information, and to do all this stuff just to pay for parking. And it's the same thing with the autonomous. Like the amount of, like, I mean, the fact is, and I said this on the show a couple episodes ago, people thought AI, and Craig Fuller, great tweet thread from him about how everybody thought that AI and autonomous was going to come for the blue collar world first, and we're fast. And he worded it so
hmm
well. We're fast. People are starting to realize that it's much harder to automate the 3-dimensional world as it is the two dimensional world with with what's going on.
AI researchers way back in like the 60s and 70s kind of like realized early on that it's really, really hard for computers to see the world the way that we do, which is why as computers have gotten better and better today, it takes so much more data to really see everything in as high fidelity detail as we do. So one, you just first you got to be able to look at everything, then you have to be able to like map everything in 3D space and interact with it. And because we're like social creatures, like I can make eye contact with you and send you social cues way faster than a computer would ever be able to interpret it. Like we may reach that point one day, but like right now today, we're seeing AI taxis in Southern California just completely grind to a screeching halt whenever a cone is put on their hood because they don't have any foresight to realize like that's not an obstacle in my path.
Yeah,
These are problems that will be fixed one day, but right now it's like every single step is just like one thing after another.
yeah, and there's a moral argument to this. It's just if you're going to be dumping millions of dollars into something, we look at our society. Look at we just had this I'd be remiss to not talk about that viral song that has took off over the weekend.
Oh
The
yeah.
rich men north of Richmond. It describes pretty much how a lot of people in our country feel for the most part on both sides of the spectrum everywhere. I know pundits on Twitter are trying to, people are trying to put it into an echo chamber. You can't because the song is 100% true. But like, look at the problems we do have. And it's just to dump all this money into torch millions of dollars into stuff that's not working, all for an end result that still doesn't benefit anybody. Like even if the trucks were autonomous tomorrow, and everything was worked and it was safe and there was no risk of killing anybody, what does that do for us as society? And I've said it before, it's not going to make anything cheaper. Like, do you think because the I've said it before, if the operating expense of paying a driver goes away, then like do you think companies are going to accept lower revenue or lower profits? Like they're just going to
Yeah, well, another thing too that surprised me is the data storage involved with a lot of these vehicles. That's what's going to really raise the rates. Is it might not even be cheaper to have an autonomous truck than to have meat in the seat, as I like to say, because whatever salary you're paying that driver might be more than. I'm sorry, whatever data storage costs you're having for that autonomous vehicle might be more than whatever salary you were paying to that driver in the first place.
I remember we were reading about this. This was like data. Somebody put this together because it had to do with Verizon.
Yeah.
It had to do with data service with Verizon, just with the storage of I think ELD stuff. I forget. I'll have to pull that article back up because yeah, the data storage of all these trucks. I mean, you figure there's 3 to 4 million trucks on there, and not only that, this is just because they're not just doing this with semi trucks. You're talking box trucks. They're trying to automate a lot of that stuff because I mean they're already trying to do it with Amazon delivery vans.
Yeah. Oh, this goes way beyond trucking too. Like every police department with chest worn front facing cameras, all that storage, or all that data on those cameras has to go into a cloud somewhere. So they're racking up cloud storage fees. Yeah, it's so funny to me how like all this tech was like supposed to be like this huge boon, but then they're kind of principalities are realizing like, oh, this stuff's really expensive because now we're paying all these monthly storage fees.
Man, that's holy shit. Talk about foresight, if only there was a way to if only there was a way to go back and like how do you figure out how to invest in data storage facilities?
Buy up as many
Yeah.
hard drives as possible. Just start racking up servers somewhere.
Yeah, no, that's another interesting caveat. I think people forget, but we can go on about this for a while. And actually, what we're about to get into kind of all goes ties into this because it has to do with with false narratives out there. So this Congressman Bob Good, this came across our desk. It was the Schmitz who sent this to you, Lee and Lisa.
It was sent to Gord via the Schmitz, and then Gord shared it with us.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So this Congressman Bob Good. He's from Virginia, and we'll look him up in a minute. But this is the bill. It's the Trucking Workforce Improvement Act. And Justin, if you want to cue it up, we'll put it on the screen for anybody who's watching via video. And I'm kind of just gonna The summary is that the Trucking Workforce Improvement Act would repeal a recent Biden regulation. So this is what I don't like about it. They're trying to make this partisan. Where the rhetoric of this bill, they're trying to make it partisan or whatever. People can read it. Biden regulation on training for commercial driver's license (CDL) that has worsened a national shortage of truckers and decimated the economy. And I don't believe that this is a Biden regulation. I think this is something that, correct? Weren't we talking about that? This doesn't have to do with the Biden, but it will come back to that. This regulation mandates that truckers complete a federal government-approved entry-level driver training in order to acquire a CDL background. For years, truckers have been able to complete a variety of different safety trainings regulated by each state in order to obtain a CDL license. On February 7th, 2022, a finalized rule went into effect, taking power away from the states and removing flexibility from companies and drivers. This regulation mandates that all truckers complete the DOT entry-level driver training and created a federal registry to track compliance. Since its implementation, this reg has made obtaining a CDL more costly, difficult, and time-consuming for employers and potential employees. While the new CDL regs impact America's supply chain and any industry that relies on trucking, it has especially hurt small businesses in the agricultural sector. I don't know if that's true. Since the rule took effect, access to the training course has become more burdensome for students. Students can now expect to pay an additional $2,500 to $8,500 for classes, with training time increasing to 20 days in certain cases. Training time increasing 20 days. Wow, 20 days? Your training increases to drive an 80,000-pound vehicle through the Rockies? You don't say. This is the best part. By 2030, the industry could see a shortage of 160,000 truck drivers.
They just keep getting bigger.
Yeah, they doubled it. It's doubled. 80,000 it's done. Would the cost of training be a major barrier to entry, according to industry experts? The cost being the bottom line. The Trucking Workforce Improvement Act would remove unnecessary federal regulation, create jobs by increasing flexibility for employer and employees, and stabilize the industry workforce, but while lowering the cost of obtaining a CDL. Let's get into that, because it's a bunch of bullshit.
Well, to play devil's advocate, there are things in there that I like and I agree with, but then there's other things. It's sort of like, yeah, there are things that I agree with and I like, but then also where they're getting their sources from and how they're justifying what they want to do is completely beside the point and just completely wrong.
Yeah, because here's, and Gord has mentioned this too. That's the thing. The government is all about, when it comes to politicians, they always want to create jobs. They always want to create gerbs. Like, there's always this shortage of jobs. We need to make more jobs. They love every election cycle. They're like, I created these many jobs. I created this. And it's just the point that they're not understanding is they don't need to create any more jobs. The jobs are available. Mm-hmm. They're all there. But the idea of what I don't like is the rhetoric here of making it sound bad to raise barriers to entry, like making it sound, because not having barriers to entry. We just recorded an entire roundtable about fraud. I've spent the last several episodes talking about fraud in the industry. We have indentured servitude at our ports, where new immigrants are locked into contracts as 1099 employees, and their immigration status is held hostage. So the fact that there are no barriers to entry, there's literally none. And they want to, and now they want to double down and make it even easier.
Yeah, the whole talking point about this is getting a CDL is more expensive now because all these additional regulations. Sure, that is going to add additional cost to your CDL, but what else is going to add additional cost to your CDL is all the grants that go along with it. Like, most people going into CDL training now aren't paying that out of pocket. Like you mentioned in a previous episode in Texas. Or maybe it was Gore's podcast. I get your guys' episodes mixed up sometimes. But he was talking with somebody from the workforce program in Texas, and how, if you want to collect unemployment, you have to be proving that you're either in a job training program or constantly applying for new jobs. And what's one of the first things that people get funneled into in a system like that is CDL training, because all the person behind the counter knows is, hey, there's a truck driver shortage. If you want to make good money, be a truck driver. It's not the case at all.
Yeah, Gord recorded a show with a gentleman who works for the unemployment office in Maryland.
And
this is what they were doing. But when I was at CDL school, I was at school with 3 people who were sent there by the unemployment office, which is the state forcing people to go to become truck drivers, unwilling people to
Yeah,
become truck drivers.
that's the crazy part is like if you're a single mom with like four kids at home, and you're in CDL training to get a class A, the only jobs they're going to be they're going to be hiring you are ones where you're going to be away from home for weeks and potentially months at a time. Like that's not the kind of job you need to be going into. I definitely feel for people in that position. Like they need a job. They need a damn good paying job. And trucking can pay the bills, but you have to be given like the full picture before you go into something like that. And I don't think enough people are given the full picture, and that's why. And part of that is why the turnover rates are so damn high. Back 16 years ago when I went through CDL training, it was 86 of us or 84 in my class. Only 16 graduated with our CDLs, and within a year, I was the only one still driving a truck. And
Yeah,
and that's only gotten worse.
there's your shortage. Like, and that's like these are clear cut, easy stats people could see. Now, I want to dive into this regulation because he's Congressman Good here. He's butthurt. Has to specifically say it's a Biden regulation. And look, hey, we're no
Yeah,
fans of
his Twitter is
yeah,
just like the most partisan, hackery, kayfabe, WWE politics I've ever seen.
yeah. It's
Part of me loves it because I'm like, okay, I clearly see that this guy's the Undertaker. Biden is, Stone Cold Steve Austin, and they're going to go out and duke it out. But then behind the scenes, they'll clap each other on the back and then collect their collect their checks.
Yeah, it's annoying, but I want to see what this is. And right on the FMCSA website, so this entry level driver training regulation, it's the FMC is regulation set baseline requirements for entry level drivers, obtain a class A or A, B, C, D, D, L. The
Here, I can
ELDT
share it.
requirements are not retroactive. Yeah, are you bringing it up now?
Yep.
Yeah, we can bring it up here. We'll add it to the stream. People can read if they are watching. So what do these people have to do? What's different about this? I'm assuming because as far as I know, I'm on Facebook pages where there are still people going to CDL schools through mega carriers. There are people who are still paying their ways through school. I'm assuming did schools just have to get a new curriculum?
I believe it was they needed additional hours with an instructor.
So they're trying to introduce this additional hours, and I just want and like because here's this is the curious case of Schrodinger's trucker again is once again you have this guy on here saying it's making it harder. You're gonna have to you need more. They're gonna have to train more to get a CDL. Crazy idea, right? More training. Imagine thinking that more training is a bad thing to start a job that's one of the top 10 most dangerous in the country. And then on the other side, most civilians, four wheelers, whoever, there are people, we have the Truck Safety Coalition and people trying to lobby to where we need speed limiters. The drivers aren't safe. Like, so on one end, it's like we need to get more we need to allow more people to just funnel into this job. But at the same time, there's this whole safety argument, like where you're arguing about how unsafe commercial vehicles are, but in the same breath, you're like, oh my God, we're making it harder for people because of this FMCSA reg where people have to train more. I don't get and what's crazy about that is because the people lobbying for the safety are making strides in getting what they want. But when the FMCSA actually maybe raised the barrier to entry and could make things kind of safer, it's getting pushed back by politicians.
All you have to do is look at the companies that nobody ever talks about as far as shortages go. Walmart, UPS, Avery. We just had them on the show today. These are companies with maybe less than half of the turnover of the on average of the industry. Those are the kind of companies that like other companies need to emulate instead of constantly like lowering the barrier to entry and lowering standards and then having to compensate that with tons of really expensive, burdensome surveillance that's just going to drive those people you just hired out the door. Set a standard, train people to that standard. If they don't meet that standard, take corrective action, and then if that's still not working, then obviously boot them. But I think the solution for all of this is basically what Jocko Willink says about like the Navy SEALs: decentralized command, have high standards, compensate well, and people will be beating the door down to drive for you, not the other way around.
Dude, I'm glad you brought up that reference because I wouldn't have came up with that because I've read that same thing before. It's the easiest way to solve the problem right
Yeah,
there. I mean, it's almost uncanny because the answers are there. You know that's the answers are there. They're being painted out by the largest companies out there. You just named them. Walmart, Averett's another one. Yeah, we see what UPS is doing, and we have the argument on the sides of both union and non. We have Walmart and UPS, and this is how it was pre-deregulation, is where you still had independents. Even though the majority weren't independents, but the independents were still, the money was still green for them because the unions made sure that rates were set high, so the standard of what the pay is. It's the same thing now. UPS and the Teamsters are doing well, but hey, look, you came on the show before. Number one reason people leave Walmart is what? Retirement.
retirement. Yeah,
Like, and that's what you want it to be. And it's so the answers are out there, but it's almost like they're being. I don't know who's not hearing them. I don't know how they're not being heard when these companies are generating billions of dollars.
yeah. If I'm, um, I'll put my mega carrier hat on. If I'm a CEO or some C-suite guy at a mega carrier like that, instead of like listening to all these people like trying to sell me a product to like solve my issues, I need to be looking at what my competition does to succeed and emulate them. Um, I don't know why more companies don't do that, because that one, it raises the barrier for, or it raises the standards for everybody, which improves the industry as a whole. And also, like, why would you want a constant rotation of people that are potentially going to put your company at risk with these like multi-million-dollar lawsuits with accidents?
Yeah, and the only way ththese companies are able to survive is because they self-insure, which actually kind of leads me to another thing that this bill kind of essentially this is almost a lie right here. It says with the new CDL regulation impact that while the new CDL regulations impact America's supply chain and any industry that relies on trucking, which is everyone, we get it. That's just trying to drive home the point. It has especially hurt small businesses in the agriculture sector, but that's wildly untrue because small businesses in the agriculture sector aren't being destroyed by this federal regulation. They're being small businesses in the ag sector are being gate kept by insurance companies.
Yeah,
Like, because you have no choice when you like, so if I go out myself, go get my CDL, I get a commercial driver's license, I can't go work for a small business or for the ag sector because that farmer and that small business, if my CDL isn't 2 years old, their insurance could be close to $30,000 a year.
yeah.
It has nothing to do with, so if anything, maybe more training on CDLs and a raised barrier to entry justifies insurance companies to lower their rates.
Yeah, well, and to not to defend insurance companies, but my wife works for one, so I will. I mean, it's expensive for them to cover drivers. They're not stupid. They have the data on accidents and stuff, and they see that safety is down, accidents are up, fatalities are up. So yeah, they're going to be a little more litigious about who they're going to be covering, and if they are going to cover a driver for you, you're going to be paying through the nose for it.
Yeah, that's who the real gatekeepers is. At the end of this thing, he says that the bottom line, the Trucking Workforce Improvement Act would remove unnecessary federal regulations, and it's just that's the thing. That's catering to his base, and I get it. This guy's a Republican. He wants to keep his job. He's trying to make it seem like he's removing regulations because Republicans like to always act like the removing regulations is always the do all end all of a quote free market. But
Always removing regulations, but never subsidies.
yeah, 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 funny. Yeah, the subsidies can't go away. Yeah, it can't. They'll keep subsidizing the CDL school, but these regulations will magically disappear. But he says it removes unnecessary federal regulations. I just don't know how you can look somebody in the face and say, "Hey, having better training or having more training and raising the barrier to entry for one of the top 10 most dangerous jobs is an unnecessary federal regulation." When the only like I don't see what is unnecessary about an improved training program. Like I said, I don't even know what the details are because as far as I know, I talk to new drivers all the time. Nothing's changed.
No.
Like nothing's been added. It's nothing's gotten really harder for people to get their CDL. The only thing that's gotten harder or is more cumbersome now is getting your hazmat. I think because you need to go to an approved hazmat course, you need to pay for it or something. You need to pay like $100 and do like online courses about it. But as far as I know, I mean, this bill definitely gets a no from me, big time. Anybody out there? I don't see what it doesn't help anybody.
I'm trying to remember because I had my CDL, but I didn't get my hazmat for like my first year and a half. And then when I went to go haul for the DoD contract, I had to get my hazmat. All I did was I went to the Florida DMV and took a test and got fingerprinted, and I had my hazmat.
Yeah, it's changed now because what's it called? Yeah, I because I've seen people talk about the hazmat. You literally have to buy a course online now.
Mm-hmm.
It's it.
I ended up dropping it because when I moved from Florida to Pennsylvania, I wanted to carry my hazmat over. And they were saying like I needed a letter from like Homeland Security and like all this extra stuff. And I was like, you know what? Drop it. I'm hauling mail. If it explodes, we got bigger problems.
Yeah, I want to see what these requirements are because I'm looking up what these. Yeah, it looks like it raises it to these Class A applicants. No, it's on the yeah entry level driver training. It's I think it was raised to maybe 40 hours or 60 hours or something for of behind the wheel. I'll have to do more deep diving on what this is actually repealing. The only federal regulations that need to be repealed as of right now is the what's the bill we were discussing before we got on the live? The
The got
FLSA exemption.
the Got Truckers Act, Guaranteed Overtime for Truckers Act.
Yeah, the guaranteed overtime for truckers act is the only one that
Man,
removes.
talk about a game changer. If that gets like first, most people outside of trucking don't realize that truck drivers aren't paid overtime for the most part. Like the vast majority. Only companies that pay by the hour, which is already like a small minority in trucking, and typically most for the most part it's like union uh, operations that pay overtime. I wasn't ever paid by the hour. I'm sorry. I had one job that paid per hour when I was working at the port in Philly, and it wasn't much. I was just working for a guy and his son. But then when I was a mail contractor, I was paid flat rate, so every day paid 12 hours. But if I could do 10 hours, I was still paid for 12. But if I worked over the hours, I would just log it in, and I was paid I think it was 25 an hour. But then when I went to the post office, it was time and a half after 8 hours and double time after 10.
Yeah, and I'm not sure why that didn't happen after the Motor Carrier Act in 1980 because the whole justification behind the Motor Carrier Act of 1980, which like I said is what started this whole race to the bottom. But the argument in D.C. was, oh, we're still living under FDR's motor carrier rules. We need to update it. The whole idea was to update it and blah blah, blah free market bullshit. Jimmy Carter was just trying to save his ass because the country was going through hyperinflation.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing is, they were like, we need to bring it up to modern day. And it's like, well, you didn't bring it up to modern day with the overtime. They kept the overtime exemption for truck drivers when in reality, the reason why they made that overtime exemption back, what was it, 1938? I think they did it because
Yeah.
the Motor Carrier Act was in 35 and they exempted it in 38. It's because they realized the directions. They're like, okay, well, you have these independents, but then you have the unions that are doing this. It's not really applying because of how the pay scales work.
Yeah, it was all equaling out in the end eventually. But I mean, comparing rates to what they were back then to what they are now post inflation, we're through the floor right now. Yeah, if there was a rule or reg set up so that everybody was paid by the hour plus overtime, there would be like a huge streamlining effect in the supply chain, especially reefer. I can't tell you how many times, and you know this talking to other drivers, you get to a grocery warehouse somewhere, and because your trailer is on the door, they'll just use you as storage to like move stuff around in the warehouse while they're loading and unloading. I've had that happen to me tons of times. I show up to someplace like delivering cabbage, they'll unload my cabbage, and then I sit there and I could feel them shuffling stuff on and off the truck, and it's so that they can like move stuff around inside the warehouse. So they're using your equipment. They're not paying you for it, and then they're wasting your time. If carriers could charge places for the time that they're wasted, oh man, that would be so sweet.
Yeah, it really and it would help the small businesses too because there's
Mm-hmm.
still owner operators out there. And I said this I said this on the last episode. There's guys, that's how great the establishment has done at dividing the trucking industry since deregulation. Is they've made it to where truckers can't even agree on giving themselves a raise. In one breath on Facebook, guys will be like, "It's not how it used to be. Where's the brotherhood?" But then but then in the next sentence they'll go, "Oh, we shouldn't be paying overtime. I don't get overtime as an owner operator, so why should another driver?" Yet they want more
Yeah,
unity, but they
yeah.
don't want actual unity.
No, one of the most like demoralizing things I can do to a driver when they brag about like how much they're making for the week because of how many miles they drove is I ask them, okay, break it down per hour, because like sure you ran a lot of miles, you're making a lot of money. How much were you average that out per hour? And it's man, if it's more than $20 an hour, it's impressive at this point.
Yeah, it definitely the hours work definitely doesn't reflect the hours paid, and I get it. I mean, that's but it still can be a good paycheck for many people out there. I'm not gonna just I this isn't if anybody's listening, I hope this doesn't actually discourage you, but there's ways to make it better. The overall the over pressing issue is it needs to improve because look at what they keep talking about with for the most part, a lot of these companies have turnover rates over 100%. They've preached this driver shortage narrative, and all that they use this for is to maintain control. So this isn't to deter anybody to start driving or to get into trucking or to get into transportation. It's just that if some of these issues aren't addressed correctly, then we're going to start running into issues where they start to rush autonomous. And we were talking before the show started, where I mean, there are venture capitalists who are essentially investing in these autonomous companies being fed the narrative of the driver shortage. So they think they're investing millions of dollars to save America from this 160,000, driver shortage, and it's like by 2030, how come we're not short, by the ATA's logic, we should be short 2 million
Yeah,
drivers by now.
yeah. It's funny how you have a shortage for that long, but then when you look at like the pay data and the rates and all this, all the numbers show that it's a surplus, not a shortage. And Craig Fuller of Freightwaves, he does a really good job of showing that like trucking is a commodity. It ebbs and flows. It has to go. It goes with like the tide of the markets and stuff. It's cyclical. To ever say that there's like a flat, static, exact number of drivers that we're going to be short by timeline XYZ, it's make believe. It's complete horseshit. You just this month, 22,000 drivers, poof, out of a job right there. They still don't calculate that in their math. It's always 80,000.
Yeah,
Well, 160,000
now
now.
it's 160,
They're literally doubling down.
yeah, and if there was a true shortage like this, and this is recent, this isn't old news. This is this Congressman Bob Good's thing. This is recent. If there was a true shortage, then in a market based off of supply and demand, then you'd see a sharp increase in freight rates and wages. The wages and rates would show for it, and it's just not
One of
not
my
accurate.
one of my favorite people online on Twitter is Eric Weinstein. He's an economist, and he has this great quote: "In market economies, there is no such thing as a long term labor shortage." So that doesn't apply just to trucking. It's literally everything: bus driver shortages, teacher shortages, nurses shortages. All of it basically at the end comes down to just pay. It's the same thing. It's always turnover is really high in these industries. People that are in it at the top rate, they're just biding their time till they retire. But the new people coming in, they come in, they don't like the way they're treated or the pay or whatever, or the work life balance isn't working out, so they wash out. That's not a shortage. That's turnover. And so yeah, I'm just rambling here, but again, anytime you hear shortage, your ears need to like start perking up and go, okay, don't think of it as shortage, think of it as turnover, because chances are that's really, I mean, there definitely are industries where there's shortages, but like you have to be able to back it up with something more than just calling. Do you ever find out how the ATA came up with that 80,000 number?
No, I want you to get that on here because they've skewed the data off something. It's almost like they twisted a narrative.
So Gore did this podcast years ago with this guy Oliver Bateman. He's a really good writer, also really active on Twitter. He found out that the way the ATA came up with that number is they just called up their associates, their companies that they're teamed up with, and they said, "Hey, how many drivers do you think you could hire right now?" And the ATA or their associates would say, "Well, if rates were XYZ, I could hire this many drivers." And they spit out a number. and all they did was they took like a small sample of the people that they or the carriers that they called and just extrapolated that out like in a straight line
Oh.
to like the industry as a whole.
so, so yeah, if you could, how many could you hire? Oh, well, I guess under this, yeah, it makes sense. Yeah. And then this is being sold as gospel
Mm-hmm.
to our government
And
who,
they've done an amazing job at selling it. I could just I like to just if I'm bored, I'll just go on Twitter, search driver shortage, and then hit sort by latest, and it's just like post after post after post, and I'll just hop in and say not a shortage, not a shortage, not a shortage. Every once in a while, somebody will take the bait and they'll reply, "Well, I just googled article X, Y, and Z, and here it says here there's a shortage," and it's like, okay, I'm glad you took the bait. Now I'm going to walk you through step by step of how this happened. It's really hard to try and get people to realize how they were sold a narrative like that.
well, we live in the culture now where everyone pushes up their glasses and go, "Where's your source?
Eh.
Source? Oh, really? What's your source? The source is I'm right and you're wrong."
Well, and you have to be. So I like to be a little tactical with this. I have to first at first I have to see like who it is I'm like arguing with. If it's somebody with like 2 followers but like 40,000 tweets, I'm like, okay, this is a waste of my time. But if it's somebody that I can go through their feed and I can see how they think, what they think, and where they're viewing this from, I'll attack it from a different way. So if it's somebody that I know is like politically conservative, I'll tell them like, okay, this is a narrative told to you by lobbyists. They get tons and tons of money from the federal government, and that's the key that makes it. If I just like go back and forth with them, like, no, you're wrong, no, you're wrong, no, you're wrong, they're never going to listen to anything I have to say. But once I know like how they're thinking and like where they're coming from, I'll have like a little like niblet that I can give them to show them like, hey, this is what you need to be looking at. And so if it's somebody who's like a little more left leaning, I can attack it with a whole uh, different argument.
Yeah, and that's really the truth behind it is what what both sides of the aisle don't seem to get is that it's not this isn't political.
No,
You can't
yeah.
pin it to Biden. You can't pin it to Democrats, Republicans because this is an overarching thing that's happening.
If I had any hair, I'd tear it out. I can't stand it when people like immediately jump straight into, oh, it's X, Y, and Z's fault, or it's Red's fault, or Blue fault. It just um, there's a really good saying called uh, thought ending cliches or something like that. And that's all it is. It's just they got their programming in. This is what the programming tells me to say. Opinion discarded.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons why I care so much about making this type of content too, because at the end of the day, it is unifying.
Mm-hmm.
Like when it comes to these issues in the transportation industry, like I mentioned, or it covers so many other industries because we're seeing it in nursing and teachers and stuff like that, and it's just the narrative that we're being sold. It's like, hey, you got to realize like there's no Republican answer or Democratic answer. That's like there's a right answer out there. And you need to realize that it's an overarching establishment. There's people who get rich off of this. There's people who are being enriched and are staying powerful, and everybody else is kind of suffering because of
Yeah.
it.
When you talk to like a rando on the street or just you work at a bar sometimes, when you tell people that you're a truck driver, how often do you get that response of, oh, my brother is a truck driver, or my dad was a truck driver, or my cousin? Everybody knows somebody personally who is a truck driver.
Yeah, they all know somebody. They're related. Oh, so he drove for 10 years. Yeah, my dad. Somebody drove for 10 years. It's always the topic. Somebody always knows somebody connected to it.
Yeah, yeah. So it's not just like a small group of people. This isn't political. This encompasses like everybody from all walks of life of all political persuasions.
And when it comes to a short, I think there is true shortages of skilled trades. I think this is factual because the salaries are showing it. I worked for a plumbing and heating wholesaler for 3 years. That was my first kind of entry into logistics, and I spoke with plumbers, HVAC guys all the time, and just the and what's crazy is there's barriers to entry to those skilled trades, and I think that
Yeah.
it's something.
How about that?
Yeah, you have to go to the school, and then while you're at that school, you have to be an apprentice. Like it takes a long time, like to go from a trade school to owning your own plumbing business could take the better part of 6 to 10 years, so to speak. But in
Yeah,
trucking, you can go to your CDL school, your taxpayer funded CDL school via Prime Incorporated, and then you can get your CDL and then immediately lease purchase a truck from them, and you're a business owner. And it's like, whereas in plumbing and in HVAC, that's impossible.
yeah. political conservatives will bemoan how any student in high school can go out there, go to college, and rack up six figures in student debt. Yet they won't even blink an eye at somebody going through CDL school and then leasing a truck for six figures. You know, it's the same thing. But at least with the truck, you can go bankrupt, and that debt isn't haunting you for the rest of your life.
Yeah, yeah. Compared to student loans, yeah, you can at least you could just go for bankruptcy and you can just walk away scot free. But yeah, the skilled trades definitely shortage because and the pay is reflective of it, and that's the thing. It's like there is no because when people go into the skilled trades, it's just like you can their turnover is that they're legitimately starting their own book of business and they're going out like most. I've never met a plumber who quit plumbing to become to do anything else. I've never met some
Yeah,
guys who
how
quit.
about that? When I can't, like me for example, I went to trucking because I needed a job, but then I'm driving a desk now. You don't hear too much about plumbers who are plunging a desk. I
Yeah,
don't know.
I
I don't
mean,
know. I don't know the right analogy for that.
the only thing a plumber and HVAC guy would do is they would grow a business large enough to the point where they have enough employees to where they're running the back office,
Yeah, yeah.
but they'll still go make house calls. But Gord mentioned this about a company that he drove. He hauled fuel for um, up in Canada. The not it wasn't Paddocks. He said he drove
Mm,
for a company named Paddocks, and he said that because this is the difference between how his local fuel hauling job because why the local truck driving jobs in this country suck too because the local jobs are all you're working every weekend for 3 to 4 years. You're working. You're 14. You got to commute to work. They torch you out quick. They burn you out. The Pepsi, the Coke jobs are tough.
oh,
Whereas Gord's job working at Paddocks, all the weekends were voluntary. But magically, all the shifts were always filled. And
mm,
if one of them wasn't, then one of the paddock guys would go out there and drive.
yeah.
And it's
No,
just like,
it really sucks how working local so that you're home every day is kind of seen as like a luxury in the industry, and so those are the jobs that typically don't pay as well. Like there are definitely local jobs that do pay more than OTR, but they're few and far between, or they're locked behind a really high barrier to entry like at UPS.
yeah,
Good luck trying to get a job at UPS right now with so many guys chasing that hundred and well, okay. I can't tell you how many guys reached out to me and were like, one, is this legit? Is this a real number? And I was like, let me get back to you. So I talked to a couple UPS drivers and I was like, okay, is this per team or per driver? And they're like, oh no, it's per driver. So you could be making $172,000 in total compensation. The pay is actually about like 110, 115. So the 175 includes like your benefits and all that. But it's team. And so many people don't want to work team. So that washes out like a ton of people right there. But it's still a really hard job to get into right now.
yeah. I mean, in UPS, I'm pretty sure you start in the warehouse. Like you don't just start as a driver at UPS. You have to
Yeah,
work your way up.
you can. It all depends on the area you're in. So like where I was at in Philadelphia,
Demand, yeah,
they were so desperate for drivers because at the time there really was a shortage of UPS drivers. They bumped the starting rate to 28 an hour in Philadelphia. And so these are what I think they were called feeder drivers. They use like a weird internal term for everything, but these were the guys that like basically go from the main hub to like the airport and pick up um, trailers full of like airmail and stuff, and then they take it back to the sorting facilities. And yeah, 28 an hour, you're working 12-hour shifts, not a bad gig. The only thing that would suck is the hours are weird, and your days off probably aren't going to be very very good. Plus, if you're trying to get like extra hours, any senior guy anytime they want could just bump you off the job, and then
mm,
they take your spot.
yeah.
So
Seniority rules.
I know, and I get it. I understand like how and why seniority like takes place in organizations like that, but it was really frustrating in the post office where you could have somebody that's been there for 20 years just being a complete slug, but because they've been there for 20 years, they got all the best routes and the best pick of whatever hours they want. But then you'll get some like new young hotshot that like really wants to like prove what they got, and it's like get in line, kid.
Yeah, and there's pros and cons to that because like I kind of think and I want to write for Gord's Substack on this on how to make the work life balance of trucking more sustainable because and I brought that up in Kansas City when I was there about how the pay and benefits are dismal. Like there's very little PTO. Like carriers don't give out like The
Yeah.
standard is you don't get a week of PTO until after you're out, until being OTR for a year, and it's 1 week, and it's not even paid out for an actual week that you'd be driving. And and that's another thing that I want is because because that's where people start to not like unions. It's like, oh yeah, people hang around too long and they don't work as hard, or it's like they don't like the seniority complex of it, especially if somebody's younger and hungrier. But I think that especially if is these companies who are primarily over the road, they need to start triangulating and regionalizing because the over the road lifestyle is just not sustainable for people anymore. They've been resting on boomers and Gen Xers, and they took advantage of it, and now it's coming to roost and it's becoming unsustainable because younger people don't want to do it because they saw that it's killed people, they've lost their families, and the pay is not even worth it anymore. So clearly, if millennials and Gen Zs saw that, they're not going to go out there and stay out there 3 weeks. And I get it, some people live and die by the mile. That's a lifestyle that works for them, but that's 1% of 1%.
Yeah, if
So
you
it's like,
if you grew up with like a parent that was in trucking and you never saw them, it's like, damn, do I really want to go into that?
yeah.
Some people love it. I mean, there are definitely, what are we up to now? 3, 4 generation truckers in some families now.
Yeah, it's just, and people aren't sticking around like that when they used to because the money's not as green. And I think that that's one method that can get people to stay. It's like after so many years, like you can start picking your lanes. You're involved. Like I had mentioned that when I was in KC, is drivers, trucking companies and carriers get caught up in silos, and this is something in corporate America that they talk about. How companies, you shouldn't operate as silos
Mm.
where this department doesn't talk to this department and this
Oh
department
yeah,
doesn't talk,
yeah.
like, and in trucking that's how it is. Drivers, they kind of put, oh, these are the drivers. When
That
driver, it's like, no, drivers are your coworkers. They
that
drive
that that
they're your
killed
outside
yellow.
sales.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that killed yellow 100%. Every driver I've talked to them that's been there for years, once they started snatching up companies and they didn't rebrand anything, they kept the same um, um, I don't want to say art. I'm blanking on the word here. When the logo, like they didn't change any of the logos. The uniforms a lot of these guys will wear. Like I'm talking to a yellow driver, but he's wearing like a roadway shirt. It's like, damn,
Mhm.
dude, how long has roadway been snatched up by yellow? So they were trying like right at the very end to implement the whole like one yellow plan, but by then it was like too little, too late. And that's my biggest concern about. We'll definitely get into Swift here in a second. But these big mergers between like Knight Swift and U.S. Express and the other smaller regional carriers that they've gobbled up is one, the name. Like they need to pick a name. Like are you Knight? Are you Swift? Are you U.S. Express? Like pick one. Pick a flag, I guess, basically to like plant in the ground and say, okay, you work for us. You are team X, Y, and Z. You're team Swift, blue and white. I love the colors. So you say, okay, we are team blue. We're gonna make all our drivers wear blue uniforms. You're gonna be part of the blue cult. You need to be team blue 24/7. And if you don't have like that cohesive company culture, you're gonna be yellow, guaranteed you, in like
Yeah.
a short time.
That's it. People have no idea how huge that is, and that came up during the driver POV panel. And it's like the drivers need to be, they silo out the drivers. Yeah, there's not an identity there. They need to get the drivers involved, and as drivers, they work with the customer service team because your drivers. And I made this reference. It's the first time I ever said it. I was like, your drivers, they're your outside sales reps. No matter how you look at it, like those are your outside sales guys. They're interacting with your customers. They can go, if you check into a receiver, you could send a driver to go talk to a manager on behalf of so and so to put a face, like, because that's how sales is done in the other business world. People like to put faces to names and stuff like that. And
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a way to get that turnover. But yes, something's got to happen with Knight Swift and US Express, because if they don't, especially with the trailers, so yeah, something needs to happen, or else they're gonna
Look,
go down the same road.
take a page out of FedEx's book and UPS and the Postal Service. They all wear uniforms. If it's good enough to put the kids in school through with uniforms, and guess what? It improves the schools. It improves your company too.
Yeah, we our friend Jackson Birchfield says, "Hey, how are you all doing?" Jackson, what's up, man?
What's up, man?
Thanks for joining us on the live stream. We're actually about to get into something with Swift because this plays into our whole 160,000 driver shortage narrative that Mr. Bob Good wants to keep preaching. And like I mentioned this before the show, Bob Good, he's friends with the Freedom Caucus. Like I said, we're making friends in Congress with Lauren Boebert and Josh Brachine with the Drive Act, preventing the speed limiters So I'm curious where Bob Good was getting this intel. So I'd like to try to. I'm gonna have to try to hound him down. We'll see what we can do. But so Swift. Oh, go on.
Yeah, I would love to talk to him because I guarantee the guy's probably one. He doesn't know trucking inside in or out, nor should he. Most of these guys are lawyers for the most part. They're just told whatever they're told to by their people. Um, but Bob, I'm telling you, if you want to like win some votes, if you want to have every single truck driver in your state have your back, you know, stop listening to the ATA and start listening to your drivers.
Yeah, no, that's the truth right there. Like that, people think Republicans think they've got drivers on their side because drivers are a little bit more conservative, but you'd be surprised. Drivers are, you know, all different sides of the aisle. So yeah, he's got to actually, yeah, buckle down and figure that out. Well, I'll try to. I'm gonna try to. Maybe I'll send him a video or something. But let's talk about it with Swift here real quick. So I was on Facebook the other day and just perusing along, and I'm in a couple toxic Facebook pages. One of them is called "Truckers of Past, Present, and Future."
That's a great page.
Yeah, shout out to a friend of the show, Chris Tackett. He's been on here before. He's in that show. He always trolls people by talking about how great Volvos are. I say because we all know Volvos are the best trucks on the road. Jamie Hagan would agree. Mack trucks.
One of my favorite trucks I ever had in my career was a Volvo day cab. So
it's fucking Cadillac, dude. I don't care what anybody tells you. You'll blow by. You'll blow by a Pete 379 going uphill, fully loaded any day of the week. Don't let them fool you. But so I was on there, and somebody had posted this picture, which it came over somebody's Qualcomm. And for those who are listening, it says, hey team, some big news coming out from the top, some safety news as well as one word. First news from the top, we are in a 911 situation when it comes to freight and cost savings. We cannot be using the trucks to go home anymore. Also, deadhead must be controlled along with idling. With freight being very slow, we need to save every penny we can onto safety. We must be sending in a macro 39 every time we back. This is a requirement for even our experienced drivers. Macro 39s are to help prevent backing accidents, and they do work. Safety, safety, safety. If you have any questions or concerns, feel free to call and ask. Thanks for all you do. The country appreciates it, even if they don't realize it.
So I was sent that same photo. There's actually two of them. We'll show the second one here in a minute. So my eyes kind of glazed over because I've seen a million of these type of messages during my career. Every company's always going to tell you, hey, watch your idling, blah blah blah. But when it said macro 39 when we back, I thought that was a typo. And so I thought macro 39 was like a message you have to send like whenever you return to your hub or whatever.
Yeah, when you're back to the DC, yeah.
And then somebody was like, no, man. You have to send that every time you put the truck in reverse. Every time you back the truck, you have to send a macro 39 over your Qualcomm. And then let me share the other picture here. So this is what a macro 39 looks like. If I cue it up here. There you go. So macro 39 is their goal. Get out and look. Basically, it's a checklist. Did you verify that the space was available for back? Yes. Was clearance on all sides checked? Yes. Are the doors secured? Yes. Trailer tractor plate number. Oh my God. This level of micromanagement is exactly why I left retail years ago. I used to work at GameStop back in the day, and you had to like fill out paperwork every time you took out the trash out there. If you had like a garbage can behind the counter there, and it was full of like, wrapping paper or whatever, if you had to throw that out to make room for yourself behind the counter, you had to fill out paperwork. I was like, I'm not doing that. Now imagine having that same kind of level of micromanagement, but now you're like a professional driver in charge of a 80,000 pound combination vehicle.
It's just wild to me that this, because number one, the first message right there, like the first Qualcomm message alone. So the idling, I get it. When I drove at Pam, and this is every mega carrier does this. If it's above 70 degrees, or your truck needs to be below or under certain temperatures for you to be able to idle it. I think if it got lower than 70, the truck would shut off. But what sucks is when it's in the 60s, your truck will still get fucking hot, and so like it kind of.
It depends if you're driving like a black cab. and the sun's out, there's no clouds. It could be 50 outside, and that truck will get hot.
Yeah, it'll still get hot. And you have to and I get it with the and I know that there's fuel savings. Jamie Hagan from Hellbent Express came on here. He what you can save, and you're like that's where a lot of businesses don't seem to realize where they can save some of their money is in fuel
Hmm.
and fuel efficiency, because on a yearly timeline it adds up. And I get it with the idling, and I with companies that large, I can, to a point, I can understand that now. But the other thing, I'm curious about going home, because Pam Transport, for as not good of a carrier I would call them, you still was able to take the truck home. They were very very lenient on that. That was like a no problem. Like I remember they let me deadhead from Allentown, PA to Connecticut when I was going home for
Ooh.
Christmas, which, so they were just like, oh yeah, drop the trailer, deadhead back. They're like, or deadhead over to, back to Connecticut. And I was like, oh really?
Yeah, a lot of companies, like if you have a driver there, they don't want to drop the truck off at the hub because, like you were saying earlier, if you take like a week PTO, guess what? Your truck's gone. They just take all your stuff out of your truck and they put someone else in there because the truck's not moving, they're not earning. So, most companies I drove for, they're pretty small. So like when I drove for Green Valley Transportation, the DoD contractor, they had was like one hub out in Tracy, California. So everybody was taking their trucks home or wherever you had to park it. Um, when I was at Schneider, I think I didn't really have a home at the time, so I was always parking at the operating center in Indianapolis and then staying at the hotel across the street. But I think with them, you had to be within like a certain mileage um, to be able to park at home or vice versa. But it also depended like if you were on a dedicated account. But yeah, I think with most places like their policy is like, hey, if your truck is parked more than like a couple of days, bring it here so we can get your stuff out and keep it moving.
Yeah, a lot of, and I get it. I understand that. It's see at Pam they let you take it home, but I know at when I was at R&R Solutions, they let me take it home. And but when I was with them, I never let the truck sit for a week. But regardless, they're a truck. They only had a fleet of 25 trucks, and normally my deadhead back home wasn't that bad. And TNI, I think, is the biggest offender of slip seating. TNI is a company out there. They pay very well. I know my trainer from Pam actually last I spoke to him. He was driving for TNI. He doing van. He makes very good money gross, but they have slip seating, and Walmart, I believe, does slip
Yeah,
seating as
Walmart
well.
does. Walmart does too. I love talking to other drivers, and because they'll pack for the trip. They'll have like one big bag, they stuff everything in it, and then that's what they've got for the week. So you
But
get you do that after a while. You get good at like getting in and out of the truck because you might every once in a while for shits and giggles I'll look online and see whether or not Walmart's hiring in my area, and the nearest DC to me is Smyrna, Delaware, and it's 100. It's about a 2.5 hour drive from me. So even after you've been on the road for a week, you got a 2.5 hour drive home after that.
yeah, it would. That's I've always. What's crazy is it's just I always saw, like, if I didn't get my truck, I would have probably either probably wound up going something union nearby, probably like ABF or something, or Everett's another good one. But I lived 30 minutes from Walmart DC, and that would have been like money in the bank, because that commute would have been easy, uh, and, and going there. But this, um, but slip seating at Walmart's not that bad,
Yeah.
because you're on a set schedule.
Yeah. I think most guys I've talked to, it was like you're out 5 days and home for two. And then there's options to, keep driving if you want. But again, that's all seniority based. And you have to understand that like if it is slip seat, that's hard to say. If it's slip seat, you're screwing up the schedule because now they gotta like rearrange some other things. I have a company down the road from me called Dabco Transportation, DABCO. If you ever see those guys out on the road, I can literally walk to them from my house. And I've looked them up. They seem to be just like a small carrier out here in South Jersey. I don't think I'd ever drive for them, but if I ever wanted to do some content with a truck, I'll go knock on their door.
Dabco. The only thing, because there's always that rhetoric that carriers use, that, or people always say is, "Oh, if the wheels ain't turning, you ain't earning," and it's like that right there to me. And I know some people hate this term, but it's like a gaslight when people say that, because
Mm,
if you own a brick and mortar, people close the store.
Mm-hmm.
People, so business it's like at the end of the day, people who run businesses, and I get it. Amazon doesn't fucking close. I get it. There's 24-hour DCs. I mean, I just talk about it because I personally believe that there's a contingency in this country that actively roots for the degeneration of the family. People are having less kids. Both members of the household are working. Your kids are at school all day. So I think there's a contingency against that. And so that's this thing. There's this whole thing of culture. Oh, if the wheels aren't turning, it's not earning. It's just like, is that all we were put on this planet to do? I'm just getting a little philosophical. It's like, is that
Yeah.
all we were put on this planet to do? It's like, hey man, the business is closed. Like, what's more important? Having better functioning, homogeneous societies of everybody having a community and getting along, or like we just supposed to be in trucks 24/7, be in warehouses 24/7, and consuming 24/7.
It's kind of a meme at this point, but like the entire region of Europe just shuts down in the month of August. You know.
Yeah. Oh yeah, France, Italy, Spain. Yeah, just basically the service industry just hangs out, and
and
they're probably having
and
fun too.
and then guess what? The lights are still on over there.
Yeah, and even I mean, even guys like Tucker Carlson are pushing this point. It's like, well, what about our GDP? And it's like, what the fuck does GDP do for people's like happiness, so to speak?
Yeah.
Like, just because the GDP is high doesn't mean I don't know. I don't think GDP is indicative of. I mean, look at what's going on in our mental health wise. I just like look at that type of shit.
There's like a rising right wing populist like anti capitalist movement that like I don't think people are either able to see that it exists or wrestle with it because the mindset is always, well, if you're on the left you're pro union, pro this, pro this, pro this, and if you're on the right you're pro capitalism, blah blah blah. But there's like enough people that are like staunchly right wing but very like anti this like capital growth at all costs. I saw this tweet, God, probably about a year ago. It said the free market put microplastics in your semen. Like,
Yeah.
and I was just like, holy shit! Like, you don't see,
I can't wait to use that.
you don't see like talking points like that from Republicans or even so much conservatives in here. But like online, it's just the Wild West at this point. On like the fringes out there, and I see attitudes like that are going to be they're going to be growing, especially in like the younger generations now because they're seeing, you know, one like if you're like an 18-year-old kid right now, you got parents that were like tip of the spear millennial. Like I'll be 40 in a couple of weeks, so if I had a kid when I was 20, he's 20 now,
Yeah, it's
and
wild.
there's no way in hell that I would have the same expectations of like an improvement of like their living standards that I would have had from my dad. Like my dad's like a retired Air Force vet. He's got like 27 acres in South Carolina. He's living like a nice comfy retirement, and I'm like, damn, I'm not gonna have that at all.
Yeah. Yeah, me, I'm like running on fumes. Yeah, I can only imagine if I had a kid. I mean, I do. I mean, I'm friends with people who had kids like I right out of high school, and they have kids who are teenagers now, and it's just like, and some of these people, they're not going to have what their parents had. That whole separation. Yeah, the idea of kind of sort of laissez-faire capital. Well, here's the thing, actually, before I get ahead, like all the evidence is online. I had just seen a video a friend of mine sent me about this. It had to do with, I forget what state, but it had to do with pig farms, and essentially, about how this guy who, he ended up working for this one pig farm, and then he gets into politics, and essentially he pushes this certain state legislation through, and the state legislation is like railroads all these other pig farmers in order to make have this one like empire factory pig slaughterhouse. And so so it took like that's the thing, and this is where vegans get some of their propaganda because because nobody loves factory farms, but factory farms aren't just a product of greedy evil or just capitalism as it stands. It's this sort of laissez-faire capitalism that is actually more of like an oligarchy. And that's the thing. It's just you had these people who were kind of like nobles. They got involved in politics. They worked to get legislation passed, and they lobbied and kind of lied about it in a sense of it's going to save people money. Because what I think it did with this pork is the price of pork was like between $2 and $4 a pound, and then because this factory farm now it was like pennies on the dollar, it was like cents
Mm.
per pound. So it's just like, oh well, now all of a sudden it's cheaper, so the world's changing. It's just like, but on a long enough timeline, now we have microplastics in our fucking semen, and like that's where it gets us, and it's just and it's sold down the tube as, oh, it's cheaper, everything's cheaper, and it's just like, and if all we're thinking of is making things cheaper, you pay cheap, you're going to get cheap. Things have value, and people made it valuable for certain reasons.
I go insane when I watch like Netflix documentaries about any kind of like chemical company, and just like the horrific things that they've been able to like get, like Teflon. Oh my god. Like I will never like have another Teflon product in my house ever again. And it's the same, like, oh, okay, then they like admit publicly, okay, yeah, Teflon's bad, but guess what? We have chemical X now. And that's literally what they called it, chemical X. And
Mm-hmm.
then it's like, oh no, well, the chemical X is like, found to have, all these other properties too. It's like, holy cow, man. Like, cast iron. I'm just gonna have cast iron for like all of my cooking utensils for the rest of
Yeah,
my life.
I know. My every time I'm on the road, I was just on the road. My wife's texting me. She's going down these Netflix rabbit holes about the same thing. She's like, "We need a garden. Like, I don't care if we start in the fall. We need to figure out how we can have a certain gardens because I just keep finding out about all these different companies that have just poisoned us over the years, and it's just like that's a result. That's the result of on this long enough timeline of voting for the lesser of two evils and letting the way politics says the way it's bulldozed itself. It's fucking wild.
If I want to get like real like philosophical, what I see happening, and like, not to say like I'm endorsing any of this happening, but I really do think that like we're the country as a whole is definitely like fracturing into like smaller regions. What that means as far as like the supply chain, I got no idea. But the idea of like a national divorce is like really popular lately, and only becoming like more and more. Like 5-6 years ago, if you just said, "Oh yeah, America's going to go through a national divorce," in the near future, people thought you're insane. They're not saying you're insane now. They're not saying no, it's not going to happen. They would say, "Well, what would that look like?" And like
Hmm.
that right there is like step one.
Oh,
Just
there's
just
a
just the fact that you're not even saying no, it will never happen now, and instead you're going, well, what would that look like? It's like, okay, that's like a huge, like, you just went from 0 to 1 right there.
yeah.
And you might have to get to like 10 or 12 or 15 before you reach that point. But that's like right there,
Oh,
step number one.
yeah. You can. There's. I'm pretty sure there's a subreddit for it, but you can easily balkanize the U.S. Like there is such an argument to balkanizing, and in a way, it does practically make sense. You split the U.S. into seven different sovereign states under the Union of the United States for like military purposes and like for military and naval purposes. But essentially, they operate as like because in at least in Europe, like trucks are going from France to Germany to Belgium. Trucks are going to different
Yeah.
countries all the time,
How,
so they
how
have
about
that.
how about
Yeah.
that? Separate countries still trade with each other.
Yes. Ah, crazy. So they have it figured out. So there's no reason why you couldn't balkanize the U.S. Still use the dollar, but a dollar in Mississippi is different than a dollar in Connecticut.
Yeah. Yeah.
A dollar in Montana is different than a dollar in Texas. So it's like there's the argument's definitely there. And yeah, 10 years ago they'd be like, "Oh man, you're secessionist," and now it's just like, well, maybe.
I mean, just look at it, like people online that are always like, "Oh, go back to your country, go back to this," and it's like, you first, okay. It's like,
Yeah.
okay, like literally take that argument and just apply it to like everybody. Like it's wild. This is all just like pie in the sky thinking. I really have no idea what's going to happen. I just as soon as I saw the rhetoric change from like it will never happen, stop talking about it, to like, huh, okay, how when you're asking like what do we do with the nukes? It's like, okay, that right there is like a big step in that direction. Just just
Yeah.
the just the fact that you're entertaining the idea is
Mhm.
is is enough to be like, oh shit, this is happening.
That's where we'd have to reel it in. It's like, yeah, you're right. There's nukes everywhere. That's where, and actually, and at the end of the day, to bring this all home, all of this can be avoided, and we can actually unify this country if we simply, if we stop, if we need to end macro 39s, and we need to end the driver shortage narrative, and we need to just, we need to start taking care of each other more.
You and like just as a company, you need to like have a little bit of self reflection. And like I'm not trying to like pick on these guys, but like just realize that you're at the point where you have to have your drivers send a message every time they back up. Like that, if I'm an executive at that company, I'm like steaming mad. I would never want my company to reach that point. I want to have the best company on the planet. I want drivers beating down the door and doing everything they possibly can to like work for me. And I don't think enough companies are holding themselves to that kind of that high of a standard because they're so massive right now. I hate the phrase too big to fail. It's the opposite. Everything that gets too big eventually like just crumbles under its own weight.
Yeah,
It's
that
inevitable.
that
It's entropy. It's inevitable.
I know, and I can't imagine having that level of mentality. It's like it's almost as if they've. It's just the drivers are just like a nuisance at this point to companies like Swift, to where it's just like their training and development team are just like, you know what, we've had, say I don't know the numbers, but it's just like, oh my god, we had 10,000 backing incidents this year. Make them send a macro. Like it's just like this is like they don't have time to address it because all they're thinking about is getting the next customer, keeping these rates, getting this rates, driving rates down, whatever. Like there's so many different things they're doing between equipment, insurance, their customers, all these pickups. There's so much going on that just when it comes to their safety initiatives and all that's in their hiring, it's like it's at this point it's just a nuisance. And it's just you're right. It's like I said, I've said it before. Wave a magic wand. I want to be the first form of trucking. Yeah, I want people I want people begging to be at the ground floor of my company, working in the warehouse. There's people at first
Mm-hmm.
form, their warehouse jobs, like people who love working at their warehouse, people who love packing their boxes. You order first form products, there are notes written by their warehouse workers
Oh,
with
that's
your
cool.
name on it, writing names to you. It's like that's that level. Like there's people now who are going to be banging on UPS's doors. There's people are banging on Walmart stores. Like,
Yeah.
why don't you want to be that?
And I've worked for companies in the past where like Publix is a really good one. Every single person that works at like the C-suite level there, they all started from the ground. But they do that by design. They only promote within the company. You cannot get hired as a manager or supervisor or anything at Publix. You have to start at the bottom and then work your way up. Can't I'm not saying like all companies can emulate that. Obviously, if you're a huge operation, you need to be hiring from whatever sources you can. But I mean, you just have to like just look at the situation you're in of just, I can't imagine like having a company where I have to like micromanage tens of thousands of people at that level.
Yeah,
It's an impossible task because now you have people at the very bottom, all your drivers who are no longer your best asset. Now they're your greatest liability, and it's a constant churn of people being flushed in and out. And then you have to have like the layer of bureaucracy above that. Um, and that I'm sure the turnover in that layer isn't all that great either. Like one, nobody wants to be micromanaged to death, and two, like the kind of person that you want that the kind of person who would love to have a job where they get to micromanage people all the time. That person's a tyrant. Like they should never be in that kind of position to begin with. The best kind of safety person is somebody who like literally has to do nothing all day. You have drivers that are trained to do their job well, and that you trust enough to like let them loose on the public and then not have to, God forbid something catastrophic happens, then you can have a safety team to like step in and kind of like, was it the FAA? Like whenever a plane crashes, I'm sorry, or who was that? The NTSB? Like that's who you want your safety people to be. You want them to be there when like something goes wrong and they can fix a problem so that it never happens again. Instead, we have these like companies where they have to have just these massive safety departments constantly babysitting everybody 24/7.
yeah. It's a level of over it. Like we should start shaking down Jocko and maybe seeing what he
Oh,
and like I think if we hound Jocko's Twitter, he engages on Twitter sometimes. I think if we can get him, we should get him. We need to start sending him this data. It's like stealth sending him this data, being
yeah,
like,
yeah.
dude,
I'm I'm a big fan of Martyrmade on Twitter, and like he's real tight with Jocko. I will be hounding him constantly on Twitter, and then probably not this year because it's pretty booked up. But like if we could get Jocko for like F3 next year, oh my god,
yeah, that would be
that
intense.
he would just minds would just explode because I don't think enough companies out there understand um, just how that kind of level of leadership works. I think just a small percentage of like what Jocko preaches out there would just like completely change the trucking industry overnight.
Yeah, no, without a doubt. For anybody out there listening, if you haven't read Extreme Ownership, I know I
Mm-hmm.
shouted it out in last episode. It'll, whether you whether you just want fitness motivation, or you want to start a business or anything like that, or you're in a management position, or you're at the ground floor, it's just really great sound business advice. And I'm glad we brought this up. But I'm not gonna lie, man, I gotta use the bathroom. But
Oh, look, come on, man. What kind of trucker are you? We go once a
yeah.
day.
Yeah, well, no, I'd have a Gatorade bottle right by here, and I just let it rip.
That would be so on brand.
But no,
right, right in the middle of recording.
Oh, right in the middle of recording. That's what I'll have to do before I. This is a little. If anybody stuck around this long, sometimes before I record with somebody, because I'll be in my truck ready to record, and I'll have to go to the bathroom, and it's like, well, I'm not going to walk 10 minutes and then walk back and keep the guests waiting. No, I'm going to rip right here. Do it later. But no, man, I want to thank you for coming on, and we'll do this a little bit more regularly, like anytime, because I like to just come on and go live and talk about like freight news. And honestly, I think it's a really good thing, and I like getting people like you and Rachel and stuff to come on. So we'll be anytime you're free, we'll be doing this a little bit more often.
Absolutely, yeah,
as long as you're down.
Yeah, and also I'm gonna get you in touch. Did you ever talk with Chris Polk from Blue Ribbon Logistics?
Yeah. Well, I went on their show.
That's right.
Couple months back. I need to get him on here. So I need to reach out to him because he's a good dude, and I want his. He tells a really Chris Polk, for anybody listening, he works for a company he started a company called Blue Ribbon Logistics. They're a capacity. They're fleet owners with Landstar, phenomenal businessmen. Like I said, I have pros and cons regarding the contractor model in this industry. I don't think it's perfect, but I don't think it needs to be completely abolished like with AB5. And I think guys like Chris Polk and his partner have mastered it well. And I think they're doing something good. And I want their story needs to be amplified way more too.
Because they're not training drivers; they're training future business owners. And I don't think people understand exactly what it is, because they look at him and they see, oh, this is just a guy like trying to hire drivers and not pay them anything. It's like no. Trust the process. It's a saying we have in Philly. Trust the process.
Yeah, he's not doing stuff like what G-Face is doing. Like, hey, send me $2,000. Oh, you need $20,000 for your truck, and then we're also going to start you a brokerage so you can double broker these loads to yourself and other people, because you can only get loads from TQL. Dude, G-Face is trying to legitimize himself too. But no, Chris Polk is actually teaching guys how to run the business. And Jamie Hagan, I'm pretty sure, is doing this at Hellbent Express.
I was thinking of him because of Jamie Hagan. We posted that clip of him on What the Truck from last week, talking about averaging 10 miles per gallon. So many people in the comments were just like, this guy's full of shit. He's lying, blah, blah, blah. And Chris jumped in. He says, this whole comment section is full of public school education or something like that. And I was like, oh my God, that's so good.
It was funny to hear people's disdain for Jamie talking about how he gets 10 miles per gallon in the Mack trucks while he's loaded. But yet I think he came on my show, and I think Mack trucks are 2% of the market share of trucks out there on the road. Like, they used to be the majority. They used to be the most amount of trucks out there were Mack. Now they're down to 2%. So it's funny how all these other drivers call bullshit on Mack's fuel efficiency, but no one's driving them.
No. And it's part of his jealousy. And half the comments I'd say were like, "Oh, screw mileage. I got places to be." And it's like, dude, you're literally like running yourself unprofitably. Like, take a lesson from a guy that's probably earning twice what you do with just a slightly lighter foot. And the other people were like, well, if you're driving as slow as he does, you're losing 60 miles a day. And it's like, okay, you're not thinking in terms of like fuel savings. Jamie had a really good post a couple months back about like you can't outrun your mileage. Like you can't run the extra mileages to make up for whatever fuel
it balances out. Yeah. It will always balance out. I made the health comparison with that. People think they run all these miles, you're going to make all this money, you're going to pay for it by being, because you're going to have doctor's appointments in your 40s, 50s. Same thing with your fuel. Like, just because you were able to run 700 miles in a day, at some point you're going to get caught up at a shipper waiting on a load. You're going to have a load that's only going 250 miles. It's going to pay good money. You're going to have to sit on a weekend. You're going to have to do a reset. Yeah, you can't outrun. Yeah, getting the fuel efficiency is more important than getting the miles. That's no doubt.
Yeah.
For anybody saying that, but hey, man, no. Thanks again for coming on. 90 minutes talking.
Yeah, right on the dot.
Yeah, talking smack. So if you are listening, don't support the trucker. Call your congressman. Call whoever. Call Bob Good. Tell him the Trucking Workforce Improvement Act is not good.
Tell
And
them to speak to drivers.
yeah, tell them to talk to drivers, not to the ATA. And for you guys out there, just to wrap this up, if you are a driver and you're listening to this, please reach out to me. You can go to lombardtrucking.com. All my contact info is there. You can find me on Instagram, Twitter, everywhere at Lombard Trucking. Shoot me a DM. Like I said, there's nothing more valuable than the story of drivers who are out there on the road doing the work, paying their dues. We want to hear everything, your life story. So feel free to reach out. But with that, Justin, you got any parting words? Words of wisdom?
Yeah, shutdowns don't work.
Yes. No.
As we were saying. No,
Yeah.
it took me a long time to get rid of the saying "stay safe." Every day at the post office was always "stay safe" to stay safe. Safety third. That's a good one. Keep that in mind. Safety third.
Safety third. You heard it from there. You heard it from Justin Best. And if you want to go find him, he's on Twitter at Super Trucker. And then where else are you at?
So I run the Freightways Back the Truck Up Twitter, FW What the Truck, same for TikTok. I've also kind of taken it upon myself to start running a little more of the Freightwaves account. So if you start seeing it sharing or liking or retweeting stuff, that's all me.
Awesome. So you guys know where to go follow him. Yeah, give What the Truck some love. Give Super Trucker some love. Yeah, and then also go check Freightwaves. Anything freight news related. Go. You're better off going to Freightwaves first over any of the major news outlets. They got a great team up
Yeah.
there. Freightwaves does what other media sources don't, and that's talk to drivers. And they also have drivers like Dooner, like Justin, who work for their organization. So keep that in mind when it comes to where you're getting your freight news. But other than that, guys, that's going to do it for episode 91. We're gonna go back to the bench. Take care.